Greetings everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm your host, Captain Rye, and today's YouTube video comes from Archer 6155. Archer is in the Tier 9 U.S. cruiser, the USS Baltimore, here in World of Warships. It's the Trap map, and it's Domination Match Mode, which is, I'm pretty sure, the only match mode that this map has to offer. And given the way that the map is laid out and the spawn points, that's probably for the best. Now, Archer is playing the Tier 9 US cruiser that a lot of people really don't seem to have a lot of love for. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Prior to a more recent patch, the Baltimore had a problem with the fact that its primary armament was kind of slow to load. Looking at the power creep situation though, well, her main guns load a lot quicker than they used to. Which means that you can get a lot more rounds out than you used to be able to. But her rate of fire is not the only major problem that the Baltimore kind of has. Her big problems are that her range is kind of short and her detection is kind of large. Unless you're running Concealment Expert with the Concealment module, you're going to find yourself kind of easily spotted. And not just easily spotted, you're going to see yourself spotted almost as far out as your gun range. Which means trying to get in close to an enemy is going to leave you pretty much exposed every time you want to take shots at something. And if there's an enemy destroyer who comes closer, they're going to spot you, and you're not going to be able to shoot back at them because they're outside of your radar range, while the enemy battleships sit comfortably well outside of your main gun range. However, that's not to say that you can't do some good things with this ship if you play it carefully. And that's what Archer's demonstrating for us right now. The enemy team is in the process of capping the A cap point, and they're almost done capping that location. Archer's team hasn't yet managed to cap or secure the B or C cap points, but they have managed to take out 2 of the enemy ships. This is going to equal the number of destroyers on each team, giving them at least a fighting chance with destroyers, and they've managed to take out 1 of the cruisers, and now they've managed to take out a 2nd destroyer, so now their team has a definitive destroyer advantage, and that means they can cap the B cap point, and hopefully soon they can cap the C cap point and start getting those points flowing in and maintaining themselves a wonderful points lead. Using this ship is a little difficult compared to other cruisers in the game, partly because the Baltimore, like her other US counterparts, does not get torpedoes, which means you can't use those torpedoes indicators to determine whether or not an enemy ship sitting behind an island that you know you can see thanks to hydro and radar is moving forward, moving backwards, or stationary. And of course, not being able to know does impact whether or not you're going to load the armor piercing, load the high explosive, or try to back off or chase them around the island. It also means that approaching enemy battleships at point-blank range isn't going to go well for you, just because you don't have torpedoes, so there's no reason to get that close. Archer's team manages to secure both B and C, and now that's going to give them a cap advantage, which is going to help start bringing in those points and increase their points lead over the enemy. For the most part, the enemy team very much so concentrated around the A cap point. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I know a lot of people like to lemming down to the A cap point, especially when they spawn on that side of the map, but it really isn't where you want to go. If you find yourself on the other side of the map spawned, send a destroyer, maybe a couple of cruisers down this direction, and then for the most part, your battleship should already be working towards the B cap point because you're going to want to get up there and snag that location. Archer's trying to put shots out on the battleships here in the distance that are presenting him broadside. He gets very lucky here as none of the battleships seem particularly interested in shooting at him, though he is being targeted by somebody. Now, the problem is when you're in a cruiser and you're being targeted and you have a lot of battleships, it's pretty easy to decide that it's more than likely one of the battleships that's targeting you. But it's just also a possibility that there could be a destroyer targeting you as well. He manages to set one fire on that battleship down there, and that's something that the Baltimore is particularly good at. People tend to forget, mostly thanks to Russian cruisers and their high rate of fire and their high fire chance, but people tend to forget that the US cruisers and their 203mm guns are also excellent fire starters. At least until they get into Tier 10 battles and they're facing a Des Moines. Because Des Moines can put out such a high volume of fire that you really have a problem. There is the destroyer who was more than likely targeting Archer from the get-go. Now he pops up, he's popped a smoke screen, and it looks like Archer manages to just barely avoid those torpedoes, which is actually kind of good for him. Destroyer caught out in the open. Now, as he's trying desperately to hide in a smoke screen, Archer uses his radar, the scourge and scorn of every destroyer captain in the game, and that destroyer's got nowhere to run. He's caught out in the open, effectively, but you can see he stopped moving. He's just trying to sit there. I don't think he fully realized that, yes, we can still see you. It's called radar. So that destroyer, no more, and that leaves the enemy team with one destroyer. Archer's team manages to lose one more destroyer, and that still leaves them with a destroyer advantage. He's going to continue putting high explosive rounds onto these battleships. At these kinds of ranges and these kinds of angles, the high explosive is actually pretty reasonable. But it's important to note that's the other thing, that the 8-inch guns, especially at high tiers, can really cause massive problems for battleships who broadside at ranges less than 8 kilometers. Now I say less than 8 kilometers because anything more than that and you might not penetrate, but at less than 8 kilometers the trajectory on your primary armament becomes so much flatter that you're just going to punch right through that belt armor. That is the only reason to close in on an enemy battleship in a US cruiser. Because really, again, not having torpedoes means that you have to rely on your primary armament to finish off anything that you're shooting at. Manages to light yet another fire on that enemy BB, and again, for the most part, the entirety of the enemy team seems concentrated down here at the A cap point. Now, Archer is stopped. He's sitting out in the open, but he's behind a friendly smokescreen, and again, this goes into using concealment and cover with the US cruiser line, especially ships like the Baltimore, where you are so large by comparison to other ships, and you sit so high in the water that you do need to use whatever available concealment you can all the time. Because if you get caught out in the open and caught broadside, enemy ships like to shoot at cruisers, and you're going to take a lot of damage. Compared to other cruisers, though, the Baltimore is actually pretty strong. She's got pretty reasonable bow armor, and can, generally speaking, bounce 8-inch shells pretty consistently off of her bow armor. But again, the only problem are those big guns of the battleships. Archer gets himself turned around, and it looks like that battleship has decided he's had enough of pushing forward here and has started reversing. Archer now out in the open without a smokescreen, and he is being targeted, but again, whoever keeps targeting him targets him for a split second and then switches away, and then switches back, then switches away. This is very, very unusual. I can personally attest that every time I'm in one of these cruisers, I'm almost always the sole focus of attention. But then again, that's because I'm well aware of things like target prioritization. I like to shoot at things I know I can kill, things like cruisers. But then again, given the same situation, depending on what's popping up, I may opt to shoot at something like a destroyer rather than a cruiser, just because the thing with torpedoes that's inside of its torpedo range is much more of a threat to me than the thing that doesn't have torpedoes that's definitely outside of its torpedo range. So he's going to continue to put high explosive fire. Can he secure the kill on that battleship? That battleship, very low health. No, doesn't manage to do it. He gets taken out by friendly gunfire, which is a little unfortunate. He did do a lot of damage to him, and if he had managed to kill that battleship, he probably would have gotten himself an arsonist for effectively burning that guy to the waterline. Switching his focus of attention to the other battleship, who just ate a couple of torpedoes, which means he's probably repaired with flooding. Now, that's a Japanese battleship, so if Archer manages to set him on fire now, he's probably going to burn for a little bit. Friendly destroyer laying another smokescreen up there. If Archer takes the opportunity to drop off detectability, he can actually get turned around thanks to this smokescreen and face the enemy. Rather than trying to constantly run away, he can close in and improve the accuracy of his guns. Archer clearly has the defensive fire consumable, which is another great consumable that American cruisers have, and it really does boost their anti-aircraft ability. Of course, it's only particularly useful if you're in an aircraft, or if you're in a game that has an aircraft carrier. If you play solo like I do, and don't div up with a lot of CV captains, switching that consumable out for hydro consumable, the hydroacoustic, would actually be just as effective. You might not think so, but the hydro lasts a whole hell of a lot longer than the radar, and it's got about half the range of the radar, which means if you're in an island-heavy map, you can really cause some problems for enemy destroyers who pop their smokescreen, especially after you pop radar. Broadside on Yamato. What did I say? The armor piercing can cause some serious problems at these shorter, smaller ranges. So he switched over to the armor piercing and guaranteed penetration, and manages his first kill in the game after 120,000 damage done. That's not that impressive. I have had games where I've managed 160,000 damage and still didn't get a kill. Switches back over the high explosive again as another battleship is bow onto him. He's never going to penetrate the bow on the battleship, but he can cause some serious problems. Nothing like a barbecued battleship, because we all know battleships love being barbecued. That's sarcasm, if you can't tell. Enemy Bismarck, or Tirpitz here, has got his secondaries blazing away, but he clearly doesn't have manual secondaries, as the accuracy on those guns not particularly good. Archer moves in front of that battleship so that his secondaries don't have a line of sight on him. He manages to set that battleship on fire yet again, just causing all sorts of fire damage. He's already earned himself a Witherer medal as he manages to burn that ship to the waterline, securing his second kill in the game, and having managed almost 140,000 damage. Most of that, almost all high explosive and fires, again, having earned himself a Witherer. A medal that I don't seem to get all that often, partly because I prefer to actually, I don't know, kill my targets in devastating strikes rather than burn them and peck them slowly to death. Manages to set 2 flyers on this enemy ship, and that ship is probably not too happy. The enemy team is starting to push up in Camp B, and the enemy has managed to kill and kind of equal the teams out, but it's important to note that Archer's team still has that destroyer advantage, and so long as the destroyers can stay relatively hidden, they can cause some serious problems for the remaining enemy ships. Now, there's not a lot of time left in this battle, as the enemy team is low on points, while Archer's team's high up on points. If they want to stay in the game, they have to kill something. Archer switches over to the armor piercing. Can he secure the kill? He does manage to do it, and secures victory with the last kill of the game for 3 kills. And there again, using the armor piercing at those closer ranges to finish off enemy battleships that are mostly broadside on, even firing into the superstructure. The armor piercing the American piercing shell, is going to be able to do reasonable damage to even the heaviest armored targets. 155,000 damage done in that game. His only claim to fame is Witherer, though. Ends up second on the team for XP earned at just over 1,700 base. Even second place, still a very respectable base XP. Thank you, Archer, for showing us how to Baltimore. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. If you like the video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment down below. If you'd like to get semi-regular channel news and updates, you can do so by liking and following me on Facebook. If you'd like to help support me in the channel, you can do so by becoming my supporter on Patreon. Any support level will grant you access to some of my World of Warships replays and screenshots early, some which make it to YouTube and some which don't quite make it to YouTube. If you got a replay like this one that you'd like to see featured on my channel, you can send it to my email. And if you'd like to watch me play World of Warships live, you can follow me on Twitch. You can find the links for all of those in the video description down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.